I welcome you back to our continuing study on the Gospel of Matthew. We have been focusing on the Transfiguration through the last number of lessons. Now there is a transition back, well, we could say into the real world for Jesus, though not strictly speaking accurate. We are going to be looking at Matthew chapter 17 and verses 14 to 16. I'm going to look at the New Testament in Modern English by J.B. Phillips. Matthew chapter 17 and verse 14. When they returned to the crowd again, a man came and knelt in front of Jesus. Lord, have pity on my son, he said, for he is a lunatic and suffers terribly. He is always falling into the fire or into the water. I did bring him to your disciples, but they could not cure him. Jesus, as it were, is trying to get ready to pass the baton on to his disciples, in particular his apostles. That is what we're beginning to see here, that the apostles represent the next generation of the church, and the work, ministry, and responsibility of that is being given to them. The disciples, of course, are not just ready to take the baton. And here we have this remarkable little story following the Transfiguration where a man has a boy with seizures. He has come to the disciples, and the disciples could not bring about his healing. And simple read of this, are we to assume that these are the 9 out of the 12 apostles who did not go up to the mountain? Or was it the 9 apostles and some of the other disciples who were not apostles? Jesus had not been present, and we can assume that what is referred to are the 9 apostles who did not go up to the mountain. Here is Jesus going from the experience of the Transfiguration to the reality that some of his leaders are not quite ready to take over the work from him. In simple terms, we could use the word incompetent. Harsh, but true. The man who brought the boy to the 9 apostles, of course, is oblivious to everything. This is part of the remarkable part of the story is you have this man, he doesn't know what's happened on the mountain. He doesn't really have an understanding of who Jesus is. He's not concerned with the dynamics that are going on within the life of the apostles. All he knows is he has a boy with seizures, and those seizures are putting that child at risk to death or maiming. What this man is focused on is that he wants his boy healed. He knows that his boy is at risk to other problems. In this way, this scene is a wonderful selection of Jesus as a juggler. We noted that he's come down from the mountain. He has been teaching the 3 inner apostles on the way down about some of what they've seen and experienced. He has the 9 who are impotent, and then he has the Father. Most of us like to deal with issues 1 or 2 at a time. We tend to get frazzled when there are multiple issues coming at us all at once. We don't have the ability to multitask and think on multiple tracks at the same time, most of us. To understand what the role of Christian ministry is, look no further than this picture. The Christian minister is first and foremost a seeker of God. You cannot have a person in ministry, whether as a clergy or laity, unless their priority is a hunger and thirst for God. The minister is the one who puts the priority on knowing and experiencing God. Jesus had gone up to the mountain, taking his apostles. The Christian minister is to be a teacher of the faith. Now, that does not mean he or she is necessarily the most mature in the faith or the deepest in the faith, but generally speaking, a trained clergy is the person who has the ability to provide the church with the foundation of the faith. That person has the breadth and depth to deal with certain issues because of their education and training. And this is why proper clerical education and training is important. There are some big issues in the life of the church, and you just cannot, well, make it up as you go along. The 9 represent in this passage the next generation. In the church, we're always dealing with the next generation. There is no future church unless we are training and equipping and preparing the next generation of leaders. Then finally, the minister is often the face of the church. So while we call all Christians to a life of ministry, we have to realize that a lot of times the ordained clergy are the public face of the local church. In other words, people come to the church with a need, a funeral, a wedding, or a baptism, and they look to the clergy because that is the public face of the church. Now, last paragraph, we talked about clergy, but it's true of all who seek in ministry. The challenge in ministry is never in the task of ministry. I've been through too many seminars and workshops that have turned the work of the church into a business and ministry into management. It is not about what the church does. It is how the church does it. Jesus did not just tell this father, take a number and go sit over there and wait until your number is called. Jesus did not say, let me check my schedule and see if I can fit you in next Tuesday after lunch. Jesus was personable, pleasant, and patient. And I think if we were honest with ourselves, most of us would say at this point we would be peeved, perplexed, and petulant. If we are to have the grace to deal with what is to be dealt with as we work with people, then it begins on a mountain where we can experience God and His grace. Ministry, whether in the church or out in the world, begins with the encounter with God. If we do not have that, then we will not have ministry.